Welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 74. We're going to talk about Silver Bullet from 1985. I rented this from Amazon Prime. I have seen this several times before. As always, we begin by discussing the prominent crew and cast. The film was directed by Daniel Attias. It was written by Stephen King, with effects makeup by Michael McCracken, and werewolf suit creation by Carlo Rambaldi. Shockingly, this is the only feature film Daniel Attias directed. He's best known for directing episodes of acclaimed television dramas. He directed multiple episodes of outstanding shows like The Sopranos, 6 Feet Under, Entourage, Friday Night Lights, House, Homeland, The Americas, Ray Donovan, and This Is Us. Stephen King is perhaps the premier author of horror, supernatural fiction, and suspense and fantasy novels of his generation. Born, raised, and educated primarily in Maine, King has set most of his stories in a fictional version of New England. King sold his first professional short story in 1967. He taught high school English classes while establishing himself in the writing world. His first novel, Carrie, about a bullied teenage girl with telekinetic powers, was published in 1974. Its success allowed him to become a full-time writer. King has been incredibly prolific, publishing over 60 novels so far and hundreds of short stories. Some of his most popular and significant works include The Shining in 1977, The Stand in 1978, The Dead Zone in 1979, It in 1986, Misery in 1987, The Green Mile in 1996, and the Dark Tower series. Many of King's stories have been adapted into popular films and television shows, further cementing his cultural impact. Other authors wrote most adaptation screenplays, but King adapted a few of his own tales directly, and this is one of those. His books have sold over 350 million copies worldwide. Among many honors, King has won the Bram Stoker Award, Los Angeles Times Book Prize, and O. Henry Award. In 2003, he received the National Medal of Arts for his contributions to literature. With his prolific output and widespread popularity across books, films, and television, Stephen King is considered one of the most influential writers of modern American literature. Carlo Rambaldi was an Italian special effects artist best known for creating E.T., the extraterrestrial. He studied art and sculpture. He began working in films in the 1950s, designing alien creatures and robots for European science fiction movies. His big break came in 1982 when he designed the aforementioned animatronic puppet for E.T. that could make incredibly lifelike facial expressions. This innovative creation won Rambaldi an Academy Award for visual effects. Other famous works included the aliens in Close Encounters of the Third Kind and The Creature from Alien, and the 1976 remake of King Kong. The cast includes Corey Haim as Marty Koslow, Megan Follows as Jane Koslow, Gary Busey as Uncle Red, Everett McGill as Reverend Lowe, Terry O'Quinn as Sheriff Joe Holler, Bill Smitrovic as Andy Ferreton, Joe Wright as Brady Kincaid, Kent Broadhurst as Herb Kincaid. Corey Haim was a hugely popular teen idol in the 80s. He rose to fame after starring roles in hit films like Silver Bullet and The Lost Boys. Haim frequently co-starred with his best friend, Corey Feldman. Haim struggled with drug addiction from a young age after being overprescribed medication as a child actor. His substance abuse eventually derailed his career. Despite attempts at recovery, Haim tragically died of an accidental drug overdose in 2010 at age 38. Now, I recognized Megan Follows as Anne Shirley of Green Gables fame, but it turns out she's played that character in multiple series and is still working today. Gary Busey briefly worked as a musician and began acting in the 70s. But Busey's breakthrough came in 1978 when he starred as rock legend Buddy Holly in The Buddy Holly Story, earning an Oscar nomination. Other major roles include FBI agent Joshua in Lethal Weapon from 1987 and criminal surfer Pappas in Point Break in 1991. In 1988, Busey was involved in a near-fatal motorcycle accident, causing significant brain damage. After recovery, he has continued acting. Everett McGill also appears in the first television show about werewolves, titled, appropriately enough, Werewolf, in 1987. I really need to figure out when and how I'm going to add TV shows to the channel's format. We're almost to that point. Terry O'Quinn is easily best known for playing John Locke on the hit TV series Lost, for which he won an Emmy, and Jerry Blake in The Stepfather and its sequels. However, he's got a long list of credits and is still adding to it. Bill Smitrovic has appeared in many movies and shows. Still, his most impactful role is former construction worker turned restaurateur Drew Thatcher, the father of three on the critically acclaimed dramatic series Life Goes On that began in 1989. He played the father to a son born with Down syndrome, portrayed by Chris Burke. The much acclaimed family-oriented show lasted 4 seasons. Since then, Bill has continued raising public consciousness and sensitivity towards Down syndrome. He hosts the annual Life Goes On Celebrity Golf Classic for the Down Syndrome Association of Los Angeles. The first werewolf movie I ever saw was The Wolfman with Lon Chaney Jr. from 1941. But this, Silver Bullet, this is the werewolf film I saw as a young teenager that left the deepest and longest impression on me. I can recognize some other films might be better, but so far this is my favorite and will always hold a special place in my heart. So yes, I recommend this film. Interesting tidbit. In Cycle of the Werewolf, the story on which this film is based, the events are spread out over a full year. The werewolf commits one murder a month on the full moon. In the film, the murders occur over several months, from spring to autumn. It would have been cool to shoot the film the same way as the story, but I completely understand the challenges in doing so. You're working with child actors who age. You have to worry about continuity, and you can't shoot batches of scenes in specific locations since you've got to get them in different seasons. Would have added a whole other layer of complexity, but I kind of wish we could have seen it. Let's move on and discuss the synopsis. Jane Coslaw narrates an unsettling story from her childhood in the small town of Tarker Mills, Maine, back in 1976. A mysterious attacker beheads Arnie Westrom, a local railroad worker with a drinking problem. His death is initially dismissed as an accident. At 15 years old, Jane has a strained relationship with her paraplegic younger brother, Marty, largely due to the negative influence of Marty's best friend, Brady Kincaid. Jane resents having to act as Marty's unpaid caregiver, causing friction between the siblings. A pregnant Stella Randolph prepares to kill herself, but is interrupted and brutally murdered in her bedroom by a werewolf. Andy Fairton is verbally derogatory of the police and anyone who disagrees with him. Marty adores his screw-up of an uncle, Red. Red is on his third divorce and drinks way too much. Red and his sister Nan, Marty's mom, have a difficult relationship, and I see where Jane and Marty get it from. An abusive father named Milt Sturmfuller is killed in his greenhouse, stoking paranoia in the town of Tarker's Mills. Brady is also brutally killed. Marty was the last person to see Brady alive. Marty jumps to the correct conclusion that it's a werewolf. The werewolf is rapidly racking up victims. After Brady's funeral, vigilante residents form an armed mob intent on finding the killer themselves. Sheriff Joe Haller attempts to prevent the townspeople but relents after Brady's father, Herb, berates him. Reverend Lester Lowe also tries and fails to dissuade them from seeking bloodshed. The vigilantes hunt for the killer in the nearby woods. They are attacked and 3 are killed. The survivors deny seeing anything unusual. Later, Reverend Lowe has a nightmare where his congregation, including the deceased, turn into werewolves and attack him during a mass funeral service. He wakes up screaming, begging God to let it end. Because of the unsolved murders, curfews are established, and the town's 4th of July celebration is canceled. The Koslaws have a backyard barbecue, and Red presents Marty with a custom-built wheelchair/motorcycle nicknamed the Silver Bullet, as well as a pile of fireworks so that he can have his own celebration. Marty sneaks out on the Silver Bullet to a bridge nearby and lights the fireworks. The fireworks attract the werewolf's attention, and it stalks him. Marty launches a rocket right into the creature's eye and escapes, thanks to his fast new wheels. Now Marty knows that it's a werewolf. Red doesn't believe, but Jane does. Marty enlists her to look for someone who has an injury or missing eye. She finds Reverend Lowe. Realizing no adult is going to believe their story, Marty sends anonymous notes to Lowe. Marty tells the priest that he knows who he really is, what he is, and urges him to kill himself to stop the murders. This evidence fails to convince Red of what's happening. Lowe attempts to run Marty off the road with his car. When Marty is trapped in a condemned covered bridge, Lowe rationalizes the murders that he has committed as doing God's work. Lowe apologizes and moves in for the kill until Marty calls for the help of Mr. Zimmerman. The siblings manage to convince Red that Lowe is connected to the murders and attempted to kill Marty. Physical damage to the Silver Bullet helps convince him. Red persuades Sheriff Haller to investigate Lowe. The adults still don't believe the werewolf angle, but they're desperate for leads. Haller goes to Lowe's house, and that evening, Haller finds evidence of the vehicular assault. He also finds Lowe locked in his garage to restrain himself from further killings. Before Haller can arrest him, Lowe transforms and bludgeons Haller to death with a baseball bat. Knowing Lowe will come after them next, Marty and Jane convince Red to take Jane's silver crucifix and Marty's silver medallion to the gunsmith, who forges a silver bullet. Red tries to spin a story about the Lone Ranger, but the gunsmith knows better. On the night of the full moon, they get Mom and Dad out of the house and wait for the werewolf. Lowe cuts the power to the house and smashes his way inside, attacking Red. The bullet is lost in the struggle. Marty retrieves it and shoots the werewolf in his right eye. The corpse reverts into Lowe before dying. As the trio recovers, Marty and Jane say they love each other and embrace. Jane narrates that although she hadn't always been able to say it, she was always able to say it from then on. Transformation is fine, since this werewolf falls squarely in the antagonist group, and who exactly is the werewolf is the focus of quite a bit of the film's runtime. We don't get a lot of transformations. We see Lowe transform right before he kills Sheriff Haller, and again after he has been shot and killed. So the transformations are simple but dynamic. The werewolf look is pretty dark, which fits both the theme of the film as well as gels with Lowe's dark human look. Black clothes, black hair, even a black eye patch. According to my research, this was intentional. Stephen King wanted to avoid the big, hulking, showy looks that were becoming popular in the 80s. This is a werewolf that hunts from ambush and shadow, much like a real wolf does. Now, it's interesting to think about the lore of this film, or rather, how this film treats lore. Reverend Lowe is the werewolf, and we get almost no insight into what he's experiencing other than his attempt to justify the murders to Marty. Marty assumes Lowe is under the control of the full moon and is susceptible to silver, but both of those assumptions are based on film mythology and never verified. The novella does make it crystal clear that the werewolf strikes on the single night of the full moon, but the film bunches the murders up. The novella does not answer the question about how Lowe became a werewolf either, although Lowe believes it is because he picked flowers from a certain cemetery. And even though a silver bullet in both versions kills Lowe, it may just be that getting shot through the eye is enough. I mean, any kind of bullet to the brain stands a good chance of killing a man, right? The sibling relationship is central to this film, so let's discuss it first. The strained bond between 15-year-old Jane and her younger paraplegic brother Marty is tested and strengthened. From the outset, it's clear Jane resents having to act as Marty's unpaid caregiver, an imposition she sees as unfairly burdening her teenage years. She knows his disability isn't his fault, but that doesn't mean it doesn't impact her. Marty, for his part, is influenced by his brash, disobedient best friend, Brady, who encourages behavior, further driving a wedge between the siblings. Their difficult relationship reflects a broader challenge within their family. Their uncle Red is an alcoholic, going through his third divorce, and their mother Nan has a conflicted relationship with him, hinting at long-standing, unresolved issues. This family dynamic has clearly influenced Jane and Marty's understanding of how to be supportive, loving siblings. I do want to take a second to point out one of my favorite quiet scenes in the film. Marty comes to Jane's room the night after he and Brady's pranks pushed her too far. He recognizes he was in the wrong and sincerely apologizes, going so far as to give her his money, offering to replace the pantyhose destroyed in the mud. Jane, now that she's cooled down, accepts his apology and only takes enough money to replace the hose. She could have taken advantage of Marty's ignorance and kept more or all of his cash. She didn't. This early exchange was the evidence that Marty and Jane will figure this sibling thing out. Extreme circumstances they face due to the werewolf's killing spree forced Jane and Marty to ultimately rely on and support each other in survival mode. When Marty accurately deduces they are dealing with a werewolf, Jane must trust his wisdom, despite initially doubting his outlandish theory. Their sibling bond is solidified after Marty saves Jane's life when the werewolf attacks. Despite their bickering, they prove they have each other's backs when it matters. The backdrop of shocking bloodshed makes their survival and reciprocal life-saving actions all the more powerful. In the end, Jane and Marty's relationship arcs from resentment and conflict to hard-earned respect and mutual protection. While a werewolf ripping families apart is the catalyst, it also paradoxically brings these two siblings together in a newfound appreciation of their enduring sibling love. Next, I want to examine the nuanced depiction of disability throughout the character of Marty Kozlov, who uses a wheelchair after becoming paraplegic at a young age. Rather than treating Marty's disability as inspiration porn or a burden, the film allows him to be a fully fleshed out character whose paraplegia is just one facet of his identity. From the outset, Marty doesn't allow the wheelchair to define him or hold him back from being independent and adventurous, maybe even to a fault. Despite his older sister Jane's role as his begrudging caregiver, Marty maintains his headstrong personality and tight friendship with the reckless Brady. He zips around town in his motorized wheelchair, not confined to the house. Critically, Marty is the first to theorize they're dealing with a werewolf after the string of brutal killings begin in Tarker Mills. While the adults discount this hypothesis, Marty trusts his intelligence. His quick thinking and deductive reasoning about the werewolf make him stronger and wiser than the able-bodied characters who disregard his theories. His physical disability does not impact his mental capabilities or determination. Marty is the only character to escape the werewolf thanks to the silver bullet, which gives him the speed to get away. Marty epitomizes the idea that disabilities should not frame how we see an entire person's worth. In portraying Marty as resilient, intelligent, and capable of outstanding bravery, Silver Bullet subverts reductive stereotypes about disabilities. It treats his wheelchair use as only one part of his identity, not letting it define his entire character arc. The film celebrates disabilities not as something to be inspirational or ashamed about, but as human differences that are normal, valuable aspects of life. Vigilante justice emerges as a central theme in Silver Bullet, as the terrorized townspeople of Tarker Mills take matters into their own hands to hunt down the menace. However, the film depicts the dangers and tragic consequences of abandoning law and order in favor of mob mentality vengeance. From the outset, hot-headed characters like Andy Ferton demonstrate hostility towards law enforcement and a readiness to bypass official channels of grievances. This simmering distrust in authority sets the stage for citizens to form a vigilante group once the body count rises. After the brutal killing of young Brady Kincaid, the emotionally charged funeral service catalyzes the formation of an armed vigilante mob, understandably. Despite pleas for restraint from voices of reason like Sheriff Haller and Reverend Lowe, who is actually trying to protect the mob here, the grieving mob is determined to hunt down the killer themselves through extra-legal means. The film does not portray this vigilante mentality as heroic. However, when the mob storms recklessly into the woods, they quickly find themselves outmatched and unprepared. These ignorant fools don't understand the enemy they face, resulting in 3 of their own being slaughtered by the very killer that they sought out, who happens to be a werewolf. The surviving vigilantes are deeply shaken and evasive about the horror that they witnessed. This disastrous outcome highlights the core flaw of vigilantism, that meting out one's own justice rarely follows procedural cautions and risks escalating violence. The vigilantes' haphazard and emotionally driven methods put their own lives in jeopardy and just continue the cycle of tragedy. Ultimately, Silver Bullet serves as a morality tale warning about the perils of vengeance without restraint. By letting fear and anger drive them to vigilantism, the people of Tarker's Mills only invite further violence upon themselves. The film argues that true justice can't be found by abandoning law and order in favor of bloody mob rule. So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed. Next, I plan on discussing Dead Time stories from 1986. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you back next episode.